Okay, so yeah, we will talk about how to read technical papers. We will be based on notes from some lecture notes from Tim Rathgarden's course, and also some other people's slides, which I will refer to in the end. And yeah, so reading papers is a big part of doing research, right? And yeah, and it is also a very hard part of doing research. And the reason that this is not very easy, this is not an easy task, is because of the characteristics that research papers have. So in terms of structure, the papers are made in a way that enables them to be as more concise as possible. So that they try to lay down as much information as possible in a very limited space. In terms of content, they provide minimal background information just in order to be self-contained, but they emphasize more on the importance of the novelties that they might have, and also they give some proofs for their statements, but the proofs are also very dense in some cases, at least in most cases. And the actual goal of the writers of a paper is to convince the experts of an area that the results are important. So it's not that they're trying to be instructive and to let people, help people become involved in a research area. They're more interested into making the experts think that the results are important. Yeah, so therefore, when one tries to read a paper, they should be more active about it, because in order to extract this compressed information, for example, it is not very helpful to read the paper like you're reading a novel. It's not meant to be read in a linear order. So one might want to spend more time into some parts and even skip some other parts altogether. And the way that one is guided through the paper is through what they want to get out of the paper. So there are some questions that one should have in mind, and then use the paper in order to answer to these questions, if these questions are not obvious without reading anything. Yeah, so really, and also there is the notion of iterative refinement, which means that one will read the paper many times before they get, and every time they will get more and more information and more knowledge. Okay, so sometimes it's not even the best strategy to read a paper, but sometimes it is the best strategy, and these times are the times when one wants, for example, to find some new problem to work on. So you won't find the really cutting edge problems that you would work on if you read textbooks, or you might be able to do so, but it's better to read the most recent results, which are not gathered in some paper and in some textbook. Okay, another reason would be to, if you are familiar with an area, to just keep up with the new results. But another reason would be that you would like to really understand the new techniques that the paper offers, and to in order to use them in some relevant problem, some different problem afterwards. Okay, so the factors that influence how well one person reads a paper, or how much time one needs to read the paper, are of course the most important factor. I think that this is subjective. I mean, you could disagree, but I think the most important, at least when you're not very experienced, is the motivation, is how much energy you want to spend on the paper. So and if you want to, if you have a way to spend some energy, the energy in reading the paper in the good way, and in a way that is efficient, then even the time that is needed is decreased. And of course, other factors are how familiar somebody is with an area. And interestingly, also it is important, at least for me, how much experience one has with writing papers. Because if you know how to write a paper, if you have written a paper, then you know how a paper is written. You know what it is about. You know where to search for in order to get the most out of it. And as I said, it is not always obvious that the paper is reading a paper is the best way to work, because sometimes in particular when you want to learn about some result that is not very recent, and then there is a high chance that this result is explained in a more thorough and helpful way in some textbook, for example. Or for more recent results, there are also some, especially now with all the pandemic situation, there are many online lectures and notes for even more recent results. Of course, there are talks about even the most recent results, PhD theses, and surveys. Okay, so the process. Let's just go to through the process of reading a paper. So the suggested process of reading a paper. Having said all the previous remarks, and the process is not only so the verb read is not the only verb that one should have in their minds with respect to that matter. It's read and think. So you read something and then you think, and this is just a process that repeats because you have to be active when you read a paper because of this compression, because of the fact that it is not something that is really self-contained. It is a part of a larger area. So you really want to be critical about the way you think about a paper and the way you read it. Otherwise, you just get lost. You always have to bear in mind what your own goals are. So I want to get this out of the paper. I want to, as we said, I want to learn what these new results are. I want to learn what this area, for example, is about. Or you want to learn something, and you will get this something out of the paper. But if you generally want to just read the paper, this is not the best way to work. Maybe you would, for a more general approach, it would be better to read some textbook or something else. Okay, so the process, the suggested process consists of 3 stages. So in the first stage, as we said, this is consistent with the idea of iterative refinement. And these 3 stages are of increasing information and more specific knowledge. And in the first stage, one just gets a simple idea of what the problem is about and what are the contributions of the authors. And in the second stage, the way I think it is that you really get an understanding of where the results of the paper lie within the context of the relevant related work. So you really get an idea of what are similar problems that have been solved and why they weren't solved before, and what are the differences between the existing theorems that prove similar results with these new results. And in the third stage, this is a really the really hardcore stage when one really delves into the proofs and all the technical claims, and they acquire a deeper understanding about the work that is presented in the paper. So it is not even needed to go through all these stages for every paper that one reads. But most of the papers, like 75% or so, typically end at stage one. One just finds which are the results that the paper has, and just a very general idea. And like 20% of the papers end at stage two, and only 5% goes through all the stages. Okay, and yeah, so at the same time, one has to keep in mind these important questions. So as we said, in order to navigate through a paper, because it is a very dense, it's very dense, and it is compressed. In order to decompress it, one has to be very selective about the information that they retrieve from the paper. These are 5 questions that Tim Roughgarden has proposed as the most, the big questions, the questions that one should have in mind while reading a paper, that will help in the navigation. So, yeah, the questions are simple, but are also very effective if you really think about them. So, one of the question is, what is the problem? So the first question is, what is the problem that the paper tries to solve, right? And then the second question is, okay, they try to solve this problem, but why is it interesting? So you try to get some motivation. It is important to know that during answering such questions like what is the motivation, one has to be really to see the glass half full. So don't be very critical about it. Just try to to get excited. So the authors will try to make you excited, and you should try also to follow this excitement. Because if you do that, then you will be more motivated to read the paper, which is good. And then the third question would be, what are the main contributions that are presented in the paper? So what is the problem? Why is it interesting? And what are the contributions? What is presented in the paper? Because all of these things are true for any paper, right? And then after answering these questions, then one goes more deeply and asks, okay, they have this contribution, but how do they do it? How do they prove this contribution? And in the end, if after all of this stage, all of these questions are answered in a very deep and complete way, the final question is, what are the main takeaways? So what do I want to take away from this paper? Because I have a subjective subjective goals, and I work in a specific area, so I don't really care about all of the information that the paper has. So I really want to extract a single nugget of information and knowledge that will be the best thing for me to keep out of this paper. So this comes after I acquire a deep understanding of the paper. Okay. So now, so in the first stage, as we said, we want to get a very general idea. So we only focus on the 3 first questions, which is, well, what is the problem, why is it interesting, and what are the contributions. And at this stage, we don't really want to, to answer even these questions in a very deep way. We just want to acquire this general idea. So one would read some parts of the introduction, especially the beginning. So it might be best to avoid reading the abstract, because the abstract is even more compressed than the paper. So it's more consistent with a reader that is experienced in the area. So it's addressing to them. So but yeah, sometimes reading the abstract is fine. But yeah, maybe it's preferable to read like the two first paragraphs of the introduction, and then try to scan through the text and find the theorem statements, or key phrases like the main result is this, or the main question that we try to answer is this. So yeah, and also sometimes it's very helpful if there are any figures or tables or anything fancy. It's easier to get this general idea. And sometimes discussion or conclusion is also helpful for that matter. But yeah, in this setting, one tries to be like very quick, very efficient, and try to pinpoint some short answers to these three questions. So what is the problem? Why is it interesting? And what are the main contributions? And this will help into navigating then to the paper. And also it will help in gathering additional resources, because sometimes we really, when we read a paper, we really miss a lot of background information. So even if we read the theorem statement or an informal statement, then we might not understand anything. So it is a good stage to gather information that we might miss. And yeah, so this should take like again, we should be very efficient at this stage. In order to this, trying to be efficient helps at least me prune non-important things out and not get lost while reading the paper. So really try to be efficient and gather these pointers. And this would last like 5 to 30 minutes or something. Okay, and then we reiterate, as we said, the iterative refinement, and we go through the same questions again, but at this time we really want to have a satisfying answer to this question. And now this will give us a more detailed information and knowledge about the results. And yeah, at this stage, we should probably try reading the whole introduction instead of just some part of it. Also to read the related work, but maybe it's not advisable to navigate through other papers, in the sense that opening a new paper and trying to read another paper while reading the first one might be, might create some confusion. So maybe one would like to understand the related work, to understand this relative framework in which this paper lies, but maybe not read other papers. Maybe not, try to read one paper and then 10 papers, This is not a good strategy. So yeah, and at this stage, it is very important that one tries to make questions, critical questions. For example, okay, this is the result, but what if, why in order for this result to hold, we need to make this assumption? if I remove this assumption, does something very spectacular fail, or why is it different with some other theorem from the literature? So yeah, and even at this stage, one could try to consider some very special cases, simple cases, and try to wrap your head around these special cases and try to prove something. Or yeah, and at the end of this stage, maybe it would be interesting to try to. So I think that every paper has like some central ideas and some trick, and this is the main driving force behind the paper. So really, at the end of this stage, maybe one could try to find this driving force, this trick that the paper is based on, just in a very, very high level, without any detail. Just, okay, so what they're doing is they had this idea. So this idea, and one can find that in the introduction and such parts, typically. Okay, so at this stage, we do not read the supplementary material. We do not read the actual proofs, but we do read like sketches of proofs, or this very high level of things. And then so this should last some hours. Right? This is more time consuming, and it is not. Maybe it's not best to try to be efficient about it. Maybe it's best to try to relax and try to enjoy it. So yeah. So at this stage, after this stage, one is really familiar with the paper, and then in the third stage, the two last questions are the ones that should be answered, which are how do they actually prove the results, and what are the, as we said, what are the key takeaways. So so then this is a very the most time consuming stage. So at this stage, one would probably spend hours, days, or months, whatever. It is really depends on the problem, on the experience. Yeah, and it's not in order to get it to this stage, one should really want to understand this paper, this particular paper, because, for example, it is close to what one tries to the problems that one tries to solve, or it is very even one would like to generalize some results of this paper. Yeah, so okay, so we have decided that we want to read this paper really to understand everything. So then we would like to read the proof. So reading the proof, again, is not a linear task. One should not read a proof in a linear way. So remember that every proof is proven by some person, right? Most probably some very clever person, but still a person. So there is some idea behind everything, right? And theorems are like have a tree structure. The proofs have a tree structure, which is like there is one or two main ideas, which are the most hard to come up with, right? Most probably, if one has such an idea, then they will also publish a paper. So it's not, so it's really useful to identify this idea from the paper, not try to come up with this idea by oneself. So this main idea of the paper helps us understand this main idea, and then there are the complementary ideas, which are smaller ideas, but not very detailed. And then at the end, there are the very details that that complement everything and really make the theorem work. So one strategy would be to try, so there are levels of importance of the ideas that are used to prove the papers. So keeping this in mind, one strategy would be, okay, let's try to find the most important idea and skip everything else out. So every algebra, everything, just abstract everything out and try to understand the general idea, the general architecture of the proof, or the most generic thing that I can find about the proof. And then, okay, is this sufficient for me in order to prove the statement? If it is not sufficient, then I would try to find something, a smaller idea, a less important idea, but still try to find it through the paper. And this is the process. So the process is, again, read and think. I read something and then I think, is this sufficient for me to? So it's like trying to prove the theorem, but I'm doing so using hints from the paper. And yeah, and so for example, the low-level details, it is best to just come up with yourself with them. It's not best to go through every algebraic manipulation that one paper has. Okay, so yeah, really, I think these are the main. So yeah, okay. So another just message is that maybe there are some mistakes in the paper, right? So this is one reason that it is not advisable to go through this algebraic manipulation, because there might be some mistakes from the authors, which is very typical. So maybe it would be better to try to prove the statements, this low-level details by oneself. But yeah, always the paper is there, and you can read it for a hint. Yeah, so with that, I would say, yeah, the reading papers is not an easy job. It is they are very compressed typically, and all these refer to technical papers, the theoretical papers. And even understanding deeply one technical paper is really significant. It's not something usual. So typically, some papers that are very technical are deeply understood only by a number of people in the world. So it's more like a superpower. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say through this presentation. It wasn't very long, hopefully, and yeah, and again, this is not my I mean, I put some of my subjective views in the presentation, but most of it is suggested by other more experienced people than me. Yeah. So hopefully this was interesting to you, and I hope you have questions, remarks, and as I said, there are some personal views that I put here. So these are all subject to question and debate. Yeah. So please come up with any questions. Maybe there are some questions in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, my 2 cents or my 2 tips for reading papers would be find if there's a YouTube video that explains the paper for you. Surprisingly works more often than I would have guessed. And then also find a person to read the paper with. It's just you don't get stuck nearly as often when someone else is there to discuss with. You can like help each other figure out the details and whatnot.
Yeah, maybe the best stage to discuss about a paper with somebody else is the second stage, I would say, from the second stage on. Yeah, just get one idea of the paper and then try to be critical about it by discussing it with somebody else. Yeah. I see some proofs here. As difficulty increases and motivation decreases, the time tends to infinity. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so one person asks, how do you find videos that explain the paper? Yeah, YouTube is really good. A lot of conferences will upload the talks to YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, the summer schools are uploading all these talks to YouTube as well. I know the CMU Theory Group is a YouTube channel that's dedicated to like recording these talks and putting it on there. It's a super useful channel for theories. Yes. There's probably other resources.
Yeah, there is also the Simons Institute that has many resources and many lectures, and yeah, it's very helpful. Yeah, in terms of conferences, it might not be best to like watch the short talks about a paper because they are again very compressed. So maybe a talk that lasts 1 hour is worth spending time on, but a talk that is like 15 minutes trying to explain something is not that much. Yeah. Let me stop sharing perhaps.